Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. After the release of the original Tron film in 1982, for a while it appeared like there wasn't much of a future for this sci-fi action-adventure as a franchise, despite earning acclaim for its visual effects and gaining a cult following. Sure, there was the odd video game here and there, as well as an appearance in Kingdom Hearts 2. But these weren't doing a whole lot to put Tron back in the limelight. It wouldn't be until 2010 when a sequel film would finally hit theaters, called Tron Legacy, 28 whole years after the original. 2010 was still during the era where upcoming films would commonly get a tie-in video game of some sort, and hoping to capitalize and build up hype for the upcoming film, not one, but two tie-in games were made for Tron Legacy. The first is Tron Evolution, an action platformer for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the PSP. The second is Tron Evolution Battle Grids, an action-adventure party game for the Nintendo Wii and DS. For this video, we'll be looking at the 360 version, specifically using the Series X backwards compatibility, and the Wii version of Battle Grids. But in a world where great movie tie-in games were more the exception than the norm, how do these Tron games measure up? Enter the grid, ride your light cycle, and let's turn the page to Tron Evolution and Tron Evolution Battle Grids. To give a brief overview of what Tron is for those unfamiliar, Tron takes place within a computer system known as the Grid, developed by protagonist Kevin Flynn. Within the Grid, various human-like programs live their lives and occasionally participate in what are known as grid games, a tournament where programs compete in a variety of activities. After the events of the first movie, beings called ISOs began to form. Unlike the basic programs, ISOs are unique, directive-free programs. This led to political strife between the basics and the ISOs, with some wishing for the two groups to live in harmony, while other basics believe the ISO's lack of directive makes them a danger to the grid. Tron Evolution acts as a prequel to the Tron Legacy film. We play as a system monitor program that is tasked to help provide security for a ceremony meant to declare peace between the basics and the ISOs. The ceremony is cut short by the appearance of Abraxas, a computer virus that begins infecting various programs and turning them into mindless monsters. We manage to force Abraxas to retreat, but as we pursue him, Clue, a program created in Kevin Flynn's own image, stages a coup, seemingly killing Flynn as well as the hero of the grid himself, Tron. Clue reveals his wish to eradicate all ISOs from the grid. Now we not only have to stop Abraxas from corrupting the whole system, but we also need to do what we can to prevent Clue from enacting his plans of genocide. As far as tie-ins go, I think Tron Evolution does a pretty great job setting up the events of Tron Legacy, especially in how we get a more substantial look at Clue's betrayal and uprising, as well as a more detailed background of the supporting character Quora. They even went the extra mile to get some of the actors from the film to reprise their roles here, such as Bruce Boxleitner as Tron and Olivia Wilde as Quora. I guess Jeff Bridges was too busy at the time to return as Flynn and Clue respectively. I like the concept of Abraxas. A computer virus slowly infecting the system is a great idea, and they do a good job of giving him a presence of dread. You instinctually get a feeling that something bad is going to happen whenever he appears. I was a bit disappointed that we only get insight into his character through these hidden Abraxas shards, which act like audio logs to present his backstory. Still, at least he gets insight, which is more than I can say for our player character, Anon. He's a silent protagonist, and I mean silent. He has no voice lines whatsoever. He doesn't even make grunts of pain when getting hurt. You only ever learn his name as Anon by reading the extra materials. Everyone else in the game just calls him Monitor. He's the most generic, blank slate hero man, and I wish they tried a bit more to give him something of a character. But that's the only real black spot in the story, as it's otherwise solid, and fits nicely into the Tron timeline without any noticeable inconsistencies with the film proper. Evolution's single player has two primary playstyles, platforming and combat. The platforming was my favorite part of the game. Tron Evolution uses a parkour system, allowing the player to wall run, jump from surface to surface, and vault off objects to gain extra forward momentum. This makes for very engaging platforming challenges, and a smooth, free-flowing way of navigating through the various levels. I love the moments where I need to jump from wall to wall, especially during one particularly exhilarating sequence in the early game, where Clue is an airship firing down on you, requiring you to think quickly as you sprint and jump through explosions and crumbling ground. There are definitely some rough areas that needed to be ironed out a bit. Some of the jump requirements can be frustratingly precise, and because you can run up any surface, it led to me going up a wall I didn't want to just because I got too close to it. Even if these quirks ended with me falling to my death, the game is generous with checkpoints, and it'll load you back quickly. So I never found myself getting annoyed at having to replay certain portions over again. The combat, on the other hand, is pretty bland and unremarkable. You can throw your character's identity disc by pressing the X button, while using B for close range attacks and Y for heavy attacks, which use up some meter beneath your health bar. You have some combos you can perform by mixing button combinations, but honestly, the range combo attack you get by mashing the X button was perfectly efficient in taking down whatever foe stood in my way, removing the need to use any other method of attack. There were the odd special enemy types that could only be damaged by using a particular type of disc, which you could switch between using the D-pad, such as Bomb, which causes an explosion, or Stasis, which slows an enemy down. The problem is these discs don't change how you attack, just what happens when the enemy is hit. So at the end of the day, it's still the same repetitive mashing of the X button with the occasional heavy attack thrown in when I need to exploit a weakness or just need bigger damage. Healing and restoring energy in combat was also something I found a little awkward. To restore health, you need to wall run over these various energy lights across the walls. So if I was low on health, I'd need to break away from an enemy to briefly show off my sick wall running skills, and then jump and run back into the fight. It's just such an odd way of going about healing, and my earlier complaint of running up walls I didn't want to still applies, which can make it difficult to perform the move necessary to get said health. I'd rather they just have made it that you slowly get your health back after not getting hit for a while like most other games. Occasionally, the game will treat you to the odd light cycle or tank sequences to change up the gameplay. I wouldn't say that either of them are especially memorable, but I welcome the variety to add something other than platforming or combat to the mix. Presentation-wise, I like the look of Tron Evolution. The series' signature neon lights are striking against its otherwise darker cityscape, making the environments look sharp and allowing enemies and interactable objects to pop in the sterile corridors. They made especially good use of the lights to organically guide the player to where they should be going next, with the walls and jump points having particular highlights, which visually told me that this is where I should be going. Given the movie it ties into, I was shocked with how forgettable I found the soundtrack to be. I wasn't expecting them to bring in Daft Punk to do the score like they did with Legacy, though they did compose 2 songs for the game, but nothing here stood out to me, and I was unable to think of even a single track as soon as I shut the game off. Tron Evolution is a pretty short game all in all. The main story can be beaten in about 5 hours or so, but there's some replay value in getting all the character upgrades and finding the hidden Tron files scattered throughout the levels, which gives some insight into the world for those interested. It also had an online multiplayer mode, but in classic Tome of Silver fashion, I was unable to play it due to me recording this footage over 10 years later. I was able to do a light disc deathmatch with computer opponents, which was fine, though it was ultimately more of the same combat I didn't love from the get-go. Footage online shows additional modes, such as using light tanks and light cycles, which no doubt would do a lot to shake up the multiplayer experience. Any experience points gained in multiplayer would transfer over to single player too, giving an incentive to play both modes in tandem, which is a neat idea. Tron Evolution is a good game. With its story and parkour platforming, there are aspects to this game that I really liked, and I can feel the effort the team put into making Evolution feel more than just an obligatory tie-in game. I just wish the combat stood out a bit more. Nowadays, a used copy of Evolution goes for about $10 Canadian or so on eBay, and if you have at least a slight interest in Tron, I'd say give it a go. There are certainly things to like here, and even if the game is a bit short, I think the price is right for just the neat parkour mechanics alone. For the Wii and DS, rather than porting or making similar experiences as Evolution on PS3 and 360, these systems would receive an entirely different game. According to an interview on Nintendo World Report, the developer thought Nintendo audiences typically want a different gaming experience than what Tron Evolution provided. And so, Tron Evolution Battle Grids was developed by N-Space for Nintendo systems. What kind of experience was the Wii version, and how does it stack up to Tron Evolution proper? Let's turn the page and find out. As the name suggests, Tron Evolution Battle Grids does away with the more serious plot of Evolution, and focuses on a simpler, more lighthearted tale based on the good games aspect of Tron. Battle Grids acts as a prequel to the prequel, taking place before the events of Evolution, but how the two stories connect is only revealed in supplemental material. You get to play as a program you can customize and name yourself. I named mine Jalen. If you know, you know. This program is an ISO, hoping to become the first ever ISO to win the Grid Games tournament. Thinking that you have potential, you're recruited by Tron to train up your skills and enter the tournament. And that's it, really. The only bit of conflict is with this program called Blaze, who starts off being a pretty generic jerk stereotype that you see in every sports competition film, only for him to suddenly escalate to kidnapping and outright murder during the tournament, to give the plot some semblance of stakes. The story is so uninteresting, and if you think the synopsis I just gave makes it sound short, you'd be right. Story mode only takes about 2.5 hours to complete. In this mode, there are a few small hub areas you can uncomfortably platform around using the D-pad, since you play these sections with the Wii Remote sideways, to collect bits, which lets you buy new gear and customization options. There are also a handful of side missions to complete as well. If you go out of your way to collect all the bits and clear every mission, you could probably get another hour or so out of single player, but not a whole lot more than that. Really, story mode is just here to introduce and ease the player to the various good games on offer, and at the end of the day, it does its job, it just doesn't leave a lasting impression. Battle Grids uses a stylized art style, giving the characters simpler, more cartoony designs compared to the more realistic art style of its sibling. Simpler designs are fine, but man, I think the visuals of this game look kinda ugly. The Tron neon light aesthetics help out a little, but the characters' faces and bland look of the environments really don't do it any favors. Battle Grids is akin to a minigame collection, letting you participate in 7 types of events, from disc combat, light cycles, tanks, and more. Each event has a handful of variations to them. For example, the disc combat has both deathmatch and grid capture, which changes up the mode in considerable ways, giving Battle Grids a far greater variety of play modes than it may appear at first glance. The problem is these events are a mixed bag, with many leaning much closer to the unfun side of the equation. I consider anything involving light discs to be the worst of the bunch. You're placed in a small arena and are tasked with eliminating as many enemies as you can. The combat system has nothing in the way of different types of combos, only having a single means of attack, quickly turning these battles into mash fests, only breaking that cycle whenever you use one of the very powerful power-up moves that appear scattered across the stage. And because these battles are based on number of kills rather than a life system, it encourages waiting until your opponent's battles leave them both weaker, before jumping in to steal a kill from another player. It's boring, repetitive, and uninspired. The tank minigames are equally as boring, especially if it's only 2 players. I found each of my tank matches devolving into who could aim at their opponent the quickest and mash the shoot button. There's very little strategy involved. Well, I guess there is one strategy, though I doubt the game intended it. In each stage, there are a handful of zones that will instantly kill the player if they drive into them. There is no real punishment for dying in these zones. You don't lose any points, and your opponent won't gain any points. What this means is if you're finding yourself running low on health, and it looks like your opponent is going to finish you off, just drive into the zone and blow yourself up. Your opponent will get no points, and you'll respawn with full health. This mode sucks, and it's as basic as it gets. Next are the runner games, which come in 2 varieties, and the gulf of entertainment between these two is vast. The runner races are hands down my least favorite activity in the entire game. Naturally, your goal is to reach the finish line, picking up items to attack your opponents as you race. Here's the problem. Every runner has a turret equipped, which has no limit on how much you can fire. Being in first place puts a massive target on your back, leading to your health getting shredded in a matter of seconds as soon as you enter first. Meanwhile, players in last continuously get powerful speed boost items, making catching up a cinch no matter how far behind you are. I understand that they want to keep the races close to keep the tension up, but the way it's handled here makes it feel like only the last 15 seconds of the race are what matters, usually favoring whichever player at the back gets the final speed boost. The runner arena matches, on the other hand, are actually quite fun. You have the same turret and attack items as the races, but rather than reaching a goal, you and your opponent are placed in a circular arena, with your objective being to drive through a particular number of checkpoints that randomly spawn around the stage. All 4 players scrambling to reach one checkpoint, all while trying to mow each other down with turrets and blasting rockets at each other, was both chaotic and entertaining. There's a bit of a luck element to it, as sometimes the checkpoints just constantly spawn closer to another player and make things far easier for them, but the ridiculousness of everyone frantically trying to get to the next location was just way too fun, and I can see this getting a lot of laughs with friends. The Hyperball minigame was solid. Your goal is to catch the ball being thrown at you and toss it back to your opponent. Missing a catch will cause the ball to hit one of the player's platforms, shattering it, with your goal being to cause your opponent to fall to win the game. Even if you don't break specifically the platform your opponent is standing on, breaking one nevertheless reduces the places your opponent can move to, giving you an ever-increasing advantage for each platform you remove. You have some influence as to what direction the ball moves after you throw it, forcing the players to think quickly and plan how they want to make their next move, giving a welcome element of strategy to the game. The motion controls all work, and all in all, handball was a pretty excellent minigame. Finally, we have the light cycles, which, much like the runners, come in 2 flavors, race and arena. The races were fine, certainly better than the ones with the runners. Cycle races don't have items, instead requiring the player to make use of shortcuts and speed boosts along the road to get them ahead, while avoiding these X's that slow them down. Tilting the Wii Remote to turn felt a little slippery at times, but the racetracks never required all that precise driving, and were usually open enough that this wasn't too big of an issue. Perfectly serviceable, but hardly anyone's first choice for racing on the Wii. Then we have Light Cycle Arenas, hands down the single best minigame out of the bunch, and what I view to be a massive saving grace of battle grids. Here, each competitor is put in a small stadium to drive around in. Just like in the movies proper, the light cycles leave behind an energy trail as you move, which fade away after a few seconds. Your goal is to strategically use your light trail to cut off your opponent and make them crash, all while you avoid running into your opponent's trail. I can't gush enough about how much I enjoyed this mode, requiring quick reflexes to dodge while needing you to think on your feet to plan out the best way to trap your opponent. Then you have some of the variations like survival, where instead of scoring kills, the objective is to simply outlast everyone else. Here, the light trails don't fade away, and instead only disappear after that opponent is eliminated. So when you start out, the arena is large and spacious, only to quickly turn into this mess of lines, covering more and more of the stadium until navigating the road becomes ludicrous. Light Cycle Arenas is so much fun, and if I may be so bold, considering Battle Grids typically goes for around $5 these days, I think it's worth buying for this game mode alone. Battle Grids also includes a championship mode, which lets you construct a circuit from anywhere between 3 to 9 events for you and either computers or friends to play through. I appreciate this inclusion, especially the customizable aspect of it, which allows me to put together a tournament without any of the modes I found unfun to play. Overall, Tron Evolution Battle Grids is a rather lackluster minigame collection, with the majority of what's on offer just not being all that great. Thankfully, the games that do excel like Hyperball and Light Cycles have the benefit of being very unique. If another video game has something like Light Cycles on offer, I haven't heard of it, leaving only Battle Grids to scratch that itch, which does the game a lot of favors. As far as movie tie-ins go, the Evolution games aren't too bad. Evolution's parkour system and story are both excellent, really only being bogged down by unexceptional combat. Meanwhile, Battle Grids is a poor package on the whole with its ugly visuals and most of the minigames on offer just not being all that good. But the good minigames are fantastic and were the most fun I had between both Evolution games. But that's not enough to save it, as Battle Grids will take the number 40 spot. Evolution will go a small bit higher, overtaking Samurai Warriors at the number 34 spot. Neither game will be going home as champions on our ranking, but admittedly, they both had bright spots which made them better than I'd been expecting. And that concludes today's video. If you enjoyed it, consider giving it a like and commenting your experience with the Evolution games below. I love getting to hear everyone's thoughts. Next time, let's ditch this high-tech future aesthetic and return to a series that takes place in the pages of history. With a little over-the-top hack-and-slash flair, of course. Please look forward to that. In the meanwhile, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.